Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Sounds to me like she was the one trying to run the entrapment scheme. The fact that she immediately started screaming about being over length without proper flagging on the trailer makes me wonder if she needed help making the payments on her vacation home. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Rear-end my trailer and demand the police? Sure, no problem. So this happened on my bachelor party about 3 years back. I took my guys on a week-long canoe camping trip. My father volunteered to haul all our canoes behind his new Ford Explorer Canyonero. He even got a canoe trailer for the event. Before leaving, we checked the local laws of the destination. The destination had a law that anything towed cannot be 4 feet past the rearmost support, strut, frame, etc., without displaying a red marker, flag. Before leaving, my father made absolutely sure that all the canoes were within that 4-foot mark, one literally right within 0.25 inches. Then, in an additional show of safety, he tied a nice red bandana on the back of the longest canoe, which happened to have a metal bow and loop for tie-down/anchoring, which was perfect to tie the flag on. This is the compliance part, not malicious in intent, but will come to be in consequence. The camping trip went well. On the way back, my mom was following behind the Canyonero in her own sedan, carrying extra groomsmen from the trip. My parents volunteered to drive them back after their car broke down on the way up. In a day-long drive home, we hit a semi-major city, touristy area, in rush hour. As we're driving on the main route, crossing an intersection, an impatient Jeep driver cuts in between my mom and dad, pulling between the Canyonero with canoe trailer and my mom's car with no room to spare. Traffic suddenly stopped, and my dad had to slow down to a stop quickly. The Jeep drove straight into the canoe trailer. Now, the longest canoe was upside down on the trailer and had that metal bow. The Jeep was an SUV, and she drove into one lower canoe with her bumper and under the longer canoe with her hood. We felt the bump in the Canyonero, and then another bump. She backed up and out from under the canoes. Her bumper impaled on a lower canoe, and her hood drove under the metal bow of the upper canoe. When she reversed, she effectively peeled her hood like a tin can opener. My dad and the female driver of the Jeep got out of their SUVs. She was a mid-50s woman from Jersey with the let-me-see-your-manager haircut, and she was in a rush to get home immediately. She commented how she owned a vacation home in the area and how he damaged her brand-new Jeep before citing local laws and said he needed a red flag, which he didn't have. It had blown off on the many-hour highway trip. My father commented that he's carrying many big red canoes home, and she was such an impatient driver that she cut off my mom, who was following him, before plowing into the big red canoes. The Jeep lady commented that it was probably a scheme for both my mom and dad to try and trick people into getting between them before stopping and forcing others to hit them for the insurance money. She threatened to sue him for damages to her SUV in addition to distress and one or two other things I couldn't remember. She demanded the police come immediately to her aid to note the details for her up-and-coming lawsuit. I already called them, my dad confidently said as he'd immediately called them after being rear-ended before getting out of the car. Good, she said smugly. Just then, a police cruiser pulled up and had to block rush hour traffic. A mid-20-something cop got out, and Jeep lady immediately was all over him to harangue him about this alleged entrapment scheme, forcing her to drive into a trailer with giant red canoes. She quotes the local law and forces the officer to get out a tape measure to check for the 4-foot rule. The police officer, obviously annoyed at this woman who rear-ended a trailer and then is claiming to be the victim, says that my father is within code. She says, "No, he's not. Measure again." He does so. He calls her over to show that the canoe is indeed just within the 4-foot rule and does not require a red marker flag. She says, "Well, check his brake lights. I couldn't see any." The officer quotes a local law saying that the brake lights must be visible at standing height at a certain distance. He then proceeds to use the measuring tape she forced him to bring out to measure that exact distance. Stood there and told my father to go hit his brake pedal. My father does so, and both trailer brake lights engage. The officer comments he's legal, and the woman berates him that he's wrong and says, "Well, I couldn't see those taillights. I was much closer than that." The officer smirked and said, "Do you think that may have been the problem, ma'am?" Long story short, he wrote the police report to state how my father was within every inch of the local laws, and that not only did this woman rear-end him, but that she must have been extraordinarily inept to rear-end a trailer full of giant 18-foot red canoes. My father ended up being awarded the cost of 2 new canoes and a new trailer from her insurance company, who found her 100% at fault. And our second story. Using malicious compliance to get exactly what I want. So I'm on a military exercise in Cold Lake, Alberta for this event. And let me warn you in advance, this isn't a typical malicious compliance story. I used MC to get exactly what I wanted this time. When engaged in a military exercise, if you get in trouble, you're usually stuck doing extra duties or a crap job nobody else wants to do. What's neat about this is that one of these particular jobs is incredibly easy, but massively time-consuming. Come end of exercise, index, and I want that particular job. What is it, you ask? Washing canvas with a fire hose. It's regarded as a bullcrap job because you're scrubbing down all the tents after they've been dismantled. It's regarded as the worst part of the camp teardown. It also happens to be early summer, so it's really warm out, and I'm about to go do something that's going to get me put on canvas cleanup. It's 2 days before index, and the alternate command post we spent 3 days setting up hasn't been used even once. This has made us, as the communications support section, pretty pissed off because that's a lot of work for nothing. One of my guys had gotten in trouble for sleeping in and threatened with canvas cleanup. My ears perked at this, and I filed it away for later use. So I set my plan in motion. I go into the Alt-CP and I plug my USB, military USB, into the sound system computer. I upload Biff Naked Spaceman into the PA system, then I take control from the main CP and lock them out. I set the volume to 11 and I set the song to loop, then hit play. Over the camp speakers, Spaceman starts belting out, I walk out of the CP with a giant butt smile on my face and start strumming my C7. It's like an M4 for you Americans, like a guitar. The infantry guys are all dancing and having a blast, and the MPs, military police, are mobilizing on their little ATVs they use to rip around camp. I meet up with my section, and everybody's wondering who could have done such an appalling thing. Shock. Gasps. So I'm chatting with them about it when the fire marshal, a sergeant, rolls up. He's a buddy of mine, and he's laughing because I had told him I thought about doing something similar. He brought the MP sergeant with him, and he's being super vague about who could have caused this. I steal a line straight from Dr. Cox on Scrubs, improvising the opening to fit my situation. As I slowly raise my right hand behind me, pointing at my own head, I say, "It's almost like somebody who had an in-depth knowledge of the system, access to it, and the ability to lock out the CP was responsible for this heinous action." Acting all shocked, I look back at my own hand, pointing at me, and continue, "It was me." Laughing, I ask them where the chief is at. Our camp chief warrant officer is busy investigating, so I stroll down to the transport tent, and he's not there. I take the opportunity to up the stakes from 11 to 15 by winking at the people in there and letting them know to tell the chief I stopped by. Then I write across his desk-sized calendar / organizer in pink highlighter, "Spaceman strikes again." The next morning when I was in the breakfast line, I feel a tap on my shoulder as the chief says, "Morning, Spaceman. I see you're up early." "Was the list of suspects long, sir?" I inquired. "Nope, pretty much just the one name," he chuckled. "You know, I had some canvas that needed some volunteers." Casting my eyes down while leaping for joy inside, I responded, "Of course, sir. I'm always happy to be an enthusiastic and participatory volunteer. Where do I report?" So I spent the last 2 days of the exercise playing with the fire hose, spraying down tents and cooling off in the heat whenever I wanted, instead of doing inventory and lugging around skids by hand. All because I decided to comply with the policy set by the chain of command for dealing with troublemakers. And our last story. How I towed a rude neighbor. I live in a small apartment building with a small parking lot. Each apartment is given one parking spot, and anyone visiting needs to park on the street. The spots are labeled by apartment number as well. Also important to note that there are a lot of car break-ins in my area. Well, a few weeks ago, I came home from work and saw my neighbor's girlfriend was parked in my spot. I know it was her because I've met them both before and have seen her park on the street when visiting on other occasions. I shrugged it off at first. I'd been working late and they might have thought I wasn't going to be home that night, so I parked on the street for the night. The next day, I went to work and saw she was no longer in my spot, but when I got home that evening, she was parked there again. It annoyed me, but I didn't want to say anything to my landlord, knowing they would have her car towed. I know how expensive that can be, so I wanted to at least try and say something to my neighbor before taking that step. The next morning, my car had been broken into. Luckily, I didn't have anything of value inside, but my driver's side window was shattered. It was extremely frustrating to deal with. That night, when I got home, I ran into my neighbor. His girlfriend was finally not in my spot. I politely asked that he tell his girlfriend to park on the street in the future, and he got really defensive with me. He complained that one parking spot isn't enough and that his girlfriend didn't feel comfortable leaving her car on the street. He also ignored me when I told him mine had been broken into. A few days passed, I got my window fixed, and his girlfriend hadn't been in our building. And then one night, I come home to see her parked in my spot again. I was pretty fed up and decided to send my landlord a text. Her car was towed away within a couple of hours, and I moved my car into my spot. I haven't seen my neighbor since this happened, but he left a pretty rude note on my door the day after. He was demanding I pay the $150 it cost to get her car back and demanded an apology as well. I will not be doing either. AITA for having his girlfriend towed out of my parking spot? I feel like I gave him the chance to prevent this. Update. I brought a copy of his note to my landlord, and she thanked me for bringing it to her attention. She told me to call right away if he tries to be confrontational with me, and she said that she would be talking with him. I'm not sure exactly what that will entail for him, but I'm hoping he learns his lesson. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.